Hello everybody and welcome to the Ibanez Beginning Electric Guitar video. My name is Andy Timmons and I want to congratulate you on your purchasing the Ibanez Starter Kit, in which you'll find everything you need to start making music on your new Ibanez guitar. We'll be discussing such topics during the video as chords, chord progressions, improvising, and techniques such as strumming, picking, muting, and vibrato and bending. And you'll have plenty of opportunity to play along with tracks that I've recorded specifically for the video. So let's get acquainted with the parts of the guitar. This is the headstock. This is the tuning gears, or tuning pegs as they're sometimes called. This is the nut of the guitar. The neck, flat part, is the fingerboard. These are the frets. The metal wires are the fret wires. Round dots are the position markers. This is the body of the guitar. These are the pickups. This particular guitar has two single coil pickups and a humbucking pickup. This is the pick guard. This is the pickup selector that enables you to change your tone and switch to the different pickups. It's your volume knob and your tone knobs. Okay. This is your tailpiece, vibrato bar, or whammy bar as it's sometimes called. And this is your input jack. To get started making sounds with your new guitar, you're going to need an electric guitar amplifier. There's many types available today, most of which have a clean channel and a distortion channel. Clean sound meaning straight guitar sound, no distortion, nice for chording, and also the distortion channel. More of a rocked out kind of sound. If your amp is just a one-channel amp and is only capable of producing clean tones, you'll need what are called effects boxes or stomp boxes that have distortion sounds or overdrive sounds, chorus or delay, to get all the different tones you're hearing on your favorite records. So let's get tuned up. In your Ibanez starter kit, you'll find an Ibanez quartz guitar tuner that you'll need to connect your guitar cable from your guitar to the input jack of the tuner. Switch the lower lever to the tune position, and for each string there is a different notch that corresponds. The 6th string or E string, 5th string or A string, 4th string or D string, 3rd string or G string, 2nd string or B string, and the lower E, high E, 1st string. Okay? Now then, there's a needle that will light up with each string that you hit. We're on the 6th string, or E string right now. If the string is slightly flat, the needle will be to the left, and you'll need to move the tuner away from you to sharpen the pitch. There we go. For the A string, you move the lever down one notch to the 5th A. It's a little flat, so I'm moving the tuner away from me to sharpen it. Tune the D string, move it down another notch. Okay. One more notch down for the G string. It's really flat, so I'll turn the string away from me. One more notch for the B string. It's a little sharp, so I'll bring the tuner towards me. There we go. And last, the E string, a little flat, so move it away from me. And there you have it. We're in tune. You should place the guitar on your right leg with the rounded out portion fitting, just like that. Your right arm can rest on the heel of the guitar, right about here. You can free up your right hand for strumming and for picking. And your left hand in general is going to want to be placed with your fingers perpendicular to the neck, with your thumb resting squarely behind the neck like that. It will vary every now and then, but that's a good general rule to follow. It will facilitate easy chordal movement and fingering for scales. The first chord we're going to learn today is D major, and it starts with an open D string at your 4th string there. Your first finger is going to be placed on the G string in the 2nd fret. These are the frets, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, on up the neck. first finger in the second fret on the G string. Your third finger is going to be on the third fret of the B string. And lastly, your second finger is going to be placed in the second fret on the E string. Now, a couple things I'll need to point out for you so you can get a nice, clean, clear sound on your chord. A lot of times you might just get a muffled sound, so a couple things to look at. You're going to want to fret the note close to the front end of the fret, not towards the back. It's going to be harder to get a good tone from that. So closer to the front end of the fret, and it's also, you're going to have to keep your other fingers from touching the strings below it or it's going to mute them. So you kind of need to round your fingers out a little bit, like so. And you're only going to be striking from the fourth string down. It's D major. Okay. The second chord we're going to learn is E minor, and you're going to be using all 6 strings on this, starting with your low E string. On the A string, right under that, you're going to place your first finger in the second fret on the A string, and then right below that on the third string in the second fret, your second finger, and the bottom 3 strings are open. So that's the sound of the E minor chord. Okay. The third chord we're going to learn is C major. This starts on the A string, fingering with your third finger in the third fret. On the D string, the string just below that, second finger in the second fret. The G string is going to be open. Then your first finger in the first fret of the B string, and then the high E open. It's C major. So just from the A string down, strum that. Now we're going to string these 3 chords together in what's called a chord progression, which is a series of 2 or more chords linked together and usually repeated over and over. For each section of this video, I've prepared a backing track for both of us to play along with. You'll hear 4 clicks, and then the band will kick in. And of course, this first play along is going to be 1 bar of E minor, 1 bar D major, 1 bar C major, 1 bar D major, and then back to E. One thing I want to point out, we haven't talked much about the right hand or the picking hand. Usually hold the pick at a 45-degree angle from the thumb. And this first exercise is going to be a real basic strumming motion. Just kind of up and down like that. You can start off a little slower if you're having trouble changing between the chords. Let's get started with the first play along. We're ready to learn some more chords. This is G major. It's going to utilize all 6 strings of the guitar. Start by fingering the E string on the 3rd fret with your 2nd finger, and the A string in the 2nd fret with your 1st finger. The D, G, and B string are going to be open, and then your 3rd finger on the 3rd fret of the E string. Remember to get a good arch with your fingers so you're not dampening some of the open strings. So that's G major, very common chord. There's another version of the G major chord that's a little more commonly used, which involves using the third finger on the B string on the third fret, and then your fourth finger where your third finger was, and the third fret on the E string. A little bit more full sounding chord. So there's this, and then this G major. I prefer the second one. Right? Next chord we're going to learn is a different version of C. We played C major like this earlier before. But coming from this G to make the C second, which it's called because it contains the second scale degree in the chord, is move these two fingers down a group of strings. So you're going to be fingering the A string with your second finger in the third fret, and then on the D string with your first finger in the second fret. So that's C, it's called C second. You can call it C major as well. Sounds like that. So it's a really easy transition to go from that version of the G chord to C second. It's a real pretty sound. And the third chord we're going to learn for this section is A minor. And that's made by striking the A string open, your second finger on the D string in the second fret, your third finger in the second fret on the G string, and on the B string, your first finger on the first fret. And the A and the E are open. So those three chords together. And then to A minor. So for the play along, we're going to make a chord progression out of those three chords and one chord from our prior section, which is D major. And there'll be one bar of each chord. I'll play it real slow and it sounds like this. So get used to changing between those chords, taking your time. This will obviously be the easiest change you have to make, then from the A to the D. Whenever there's a problem in any particular chord progression that you're working on, be sure and try to isolate the two chords maybe that are giving you the most problem in changing. Just practice going back and forth between them. So we're ready for play along 2. Okay, you may have noticed at one point during the D chord that I was adding certain notes and making the chord sound different. It's called ornamenting the chord, and it's real common, especially on that D major chord. What I was doing was, to the actual D major chord, adding my fourth finger to the third fret of the E string to create that sound, then resolving back to the D major chord, and then lifting the second finger off to the open E string. Real common sound you hear quite a bit, especially on the D major chord on the guitar. Other things I wanted to point out was that between the D major and then going back to the G, you'll notice that you can leave the third finger where it is. It's always good to, between any two chords, to see if there's any fingers that are common in both chords and try to keep them constant between the two. The less movement, the better, instead of going and then lifting everything off. Also, another thing, something that helps create a good time feel, as you probably notice while I'm playing, I've got my leg tapping or my foot tapping. Some part of your body moving in time will really help solidify your time feel and feeling the beat. Even if it's just your head nodding. So when you're practicing, work on doing that. Okay, now we're ready to switch from a clean sound to a distortion sound. So if you have distortion on your amplifier, click that in, or if you don't, hopefully you have some kind of distortion pedal device that you can kick on now to get the distortion sound. Something like this. Okay, and what we're going to work on first is playing what's called an open power chord. It's called open because it contains an open string somewhere in the chord. Now, the first chord we're going to learn today is an open E chord. E5 it's sometimes called, and it contains the open E string. Then your first finger is going to bar across two strings, and the second fret across the A and the D string. You're just only going to play those three strings. It'll sound just like that. And another technique is going to come into play here, and it's going to be something that will be really useful when you're playing with distortion, because there's going to be a lot of extraneous noise because you're dealing with a lot of gain. So there's going to be muting going on in both your left and your right hand. If you'll notice in my right hand, I'm resting the palm, this part of the palm of my hand across the strings as soon as I strike them, even while I'm hitting them, to get a more controlled, even sound. And sometimes your left hand can mute as well with the other fingers coming across after you've let the first part of the chord speak out. But in this exercise, we're going to primarily be muting with your left, your right finger, picking hand. Okay. The A power chord is going to look just like that. You're just going to be moving it down a string. So you can have an open A chord, open A note, and then your first finger is going to bar across the D and the G string in the second fret. Sound like that. Playing these with all downstrokes and muting. And next is the D power chord. Not quite as simple as the other two. It requires a second finger involved. And it's the open D string, your first finger on the G string in the second fret, and then in the third fret of the B string, you've got your third finger. It's going to look like the bottom portion of the D major chord that you already know, but you're just going to play those three strings, the D, the G, and the B string. Sounds like that. So practice going between these chords. So we're ready for the third play along. Let's start the band up. Great. These chords sound great, obviously, chugging along, but you can also just let them ring out. Experiment around with that style of playing as well. Now we're going to move on to another type of power chord. The first ones we started with were open power chords. Now we're going to go to one with all three notes fingered, called the bar power chord. And the first one we're going to play is the A bar power chord, starting with the first finger in the 5th fret on the E string, the 3rd finger in the 7th fret on the A string, and your 4th finger on the 7th fret of the D string. And again, you're only going to be hitting the top 3 strings. It sounds similar to this, a little different tone though. And that's the A power chord. You know the name of the power chord by the note that's in the lowest, fingering on the lowest note, the lowest string. Since that note is A, it's an A power chord. Now we're going to refer to a graph that's going to show on your screen of all the notes on the guitar. So now that you know this particular chord fingering, you can move it to anywhere on the neck and it'll be a different chord using that same fingering. So if you have it here and you know that this note is A, and that's an A power chord. This note's G, so that's a G power chord. So our next chord progression is going to involve the A power chord, the G power chord, and then the F power chord, all named by this lowest note. And it's going to be one bar of each. You can pretty much keep the same fingers just sliding up and down, just muting in between the slide. So it'll sound like this with one bar of each chord. So ready for the next play along. Now we're ready to learn our first scale, and it's going to be the A minor scale. It's going to start with the first finger in the 5th fret on the E string, the 4th finger in the 8th fret, and then to the A string we're going to be in the 5th fret again with the first finger, 7th fret with the 3rd, and then on the D string, same thing, with the 1st and 3rd finger in the 5th and 7th fret. Then on the G string, from the 5th fret to the 7th fret, 1st and 3rd finger again. Then on the B string, first finger on the 5th fret and 8th fret with the 4th finger. The same thing again on the E string. So it sounds like this. Also introducing a new technique at this point, and it's called alternate picking. Mostly we've been kind of downstroking things, just fine, but to facilitate a quicker speed, it's good to learn the alternate picking technique, which means simply that after a downstroke, it's followed by an upstroke. It alternates between those two. So it's down, up, etc. So practice that scale nice and slow like that, up and down, until it really gets under your fingers. Now what we're going to do, we're going to practice a little improvising now. We're going to play that scale over the last chord progression from the last play along, which was in the key of A minor, if you recall. So we're going to play along with that last track, and I'll play first couple of times through with you, then let you experiment, and then I'll play at the very end of the play along. You may have noticed during that last play-along that I was not only just playing the notes of the scale, but I was adding certain inflections to them, such as vibrato, and I was bending certain notes. It's a great way to add personality to the notes that you're playing and make them sound more like a vocalist might sing, instead of just playing a note plainly, which is fine, but it's nice to add a little bit of vibrato to that note. So let's talk about vibrato first. We'll play the note C, which is in the 5th fret on the G string with your first finger. And hear the sound of the note just plain. And now we're going to pull. I'm going to shake the string a little bit, pulling in a downward motion. Shaking your wrist a little bit, like that. To give that note just a little bit of extra feel and sound. You can also do it by bending up a little bit. But notice that my thumb is wrapping around just a little bit to give a little bit of extra anchor. Okay? We'll try the same technique on the same string in the 7th fret with your 3rd finger. So practice that on each note of the scale with each consecutive finger. Often there'll be vibrato put at the end of a phrase, at the end of a few notes that you play. Okay. You may have also noticed some bending that I was doing. It's basically 2 different styles of bends we'll talk about today. And the first one being a half-step bend. When I talk about half-step and whole step, that means I'm bending up a half-step, 1 fret. Okay, so let's try that. On the G string in 7th fret with your 3rd finger, pushing up slightly so it matches the note that if you would fret a half step higher, it matches that note. And also in bending, it helps to keep the other fingers that are behind the finger to also help bend it up instead of just trying to bend it with just the 1 finger. Gives you a little bit more strength. That's a half step bend. And I'm bending up, then bending back down, and then playing the note below it, and then the note A. Okay, now we're going to try a whole step bend, which means literally that you're bending up a whole step, which is 2 frets. A little harder to stretch that string up that far. Also experiment with staying at the height of the bent note. This particular whole step bend, you can check the tuning of it by fingering the note E, which is in the 5th fret of the on the B string. And also bend this note from the 8th fret of the B string up a whole step. Adding a little vibrato at the top of the bend. So experiment around with these new techniques. It takes a little while to get them under your fingers, but it'll add a lot more expression and personality to your playing. Next up, we're going to learn one more position of the power chord. Before, we were playing power chords that were named by the note on the E string. Now we're going to play some with the low note on the A string. Again, it's going to be the same fingering, and the lowest note in the chord will name it. So refer again to the graph, if you need to, of the guitar neck that names each note. We're going to start with an E power chord, sometimes called E5. It'll be the same fingering as the other bar chords. So to play an E bar chord, starting on the A string, you'll be in the 7th fret with the 1st finger, in the 9th fret with the 3rd finger on the D string, and on the G string, the 4th finger will go in the 9th fret. You just play those 3 strings. So thusly, that's E, moving it down to the note D, it's a D power chord. So we're going to play a chord progression that's going to involve the E and D power chord that are named on the A string, and then the G and the A that are starting with the low note on the E string. Experiment with letting them ring out. You can keep chugging along while I'm playing this. Next up, we're going to learn the E blues scale, which looks very similar to the A minor pentatonic shape that we already went over. And it's going to be in the key of E, so we're just basically going to move that whole shape up to E. The low note E will name the scale. And it's basically adding one note to the minor pentatonic to make it the blues scale. So before we had, that would be E minor pentatonic. Now we're going to add one note. Instead of just playing 2 notes on the A string, we're going to add the 2nd finger on the 13th fret in this case. And this will be the same. And then on the G string, after we fret in the 14th fret, we're going to add the 15th fret with the 4th finger. Then the top two notes are the same. So play it together one time real slow. 3 and 4 and... That's called the E blues scale. For the next play along, we're going to experiment playing the E blues scale over the previous play along chord progression. So you hear how the E blues scale fits over the E, the D, the G, and the A power chords. So at the beginning of the play along, I'll play the scale real slowly up and down with you a couple of times. Then I'm going to give you a lot of space to experiment around with the blues scale and try to incorporate some of the bending ideas that we did in the other key. Adding vibrato. Okay, so here we go. Next up, we're going to learn the 12-bar blues, or boogie pattern here, with some chords that we already know, the A power chord, the D power chord, and the E power chord. Those are the basic 3 chords you need to play the 12-bar blues. The first chord on the A is going to sound like this. We're going to use those same 3 notes, but we're going to add on the D string, the 4th fret with your 3rd finger, we're going to add that note. And go back and forth between the regular chord and then the chord with that note added. Okay? We'll do the same thing on the D chord. Okay, but instead of using the 1st and 3rd finger to finger those notes of the power chord like we did before, we're going to use our 1st and 2nd finger on that B string in the 3rd fret. And the note we're going to add is going to be on the 4th string of the, the 4th fret of the G string with the 3rd finger. So it'll sound like this. Okay? And just the same way on the A string, the A chord. On the E chord, we're going to add the note on the 4th fret of the A string with your 3rd finger. It's going to sound like this. So now when we put those together in the correct form of the blues, it'll sound like this. There's going to be 4 bars of the A chord first. 2 bars of the D. 2 bars of the A. 1 bar of B. 1 bar of D. 1 bar of A. And 1 bar of B. Then repeats it all over again. 4 bars of A, 2, 4, 2 bars of D, 2 bars of A, 1 of E, 1 of D, 1 of A, 1 of E again. Okay. The last scale shape we're going to go over is basically the same pentatonic that we learned in A. We're just going to add a few notes below and above it to extend the range of the scale. Before we were pretty much staying in the what's called the box pattern. Kind of resembles a box the way the shape of the scale. Now we're going to add an actual one note below it in a slightly different fingering, even though it's going to be similar notes to the position in this fingering that we've already done. So instead of starting with your first finger on the 5th fret, we're going to start a note a whole step below, note G on the E string with your first finger in the 3rd fret, then adding your 3rd finger in the 5th fret, then in the 3rd fret on the A string with your first finger, 3rd finger in the 5th fret, and sliding up to the 7th fret, so it's going to sound like this. Okay, then the middle of the scale will be the same. On the G string, after fretting the 7th fret, you're going to slide that up to the 9th fret, so it'll sound like. And then on the B string, you're going to fret the 8th fret with your first finger, and then the 10th fret with the 3rd finger. And the same thing on the E string, 8th and 10th fret with your first and 3rd finger. So the whole scale will sound like this. And you can even add the note above that, sliding up to the E, the 12th fret with your 3rd finger. Now to this you can also add the blues scale note, the note in between these notes here. So it would look like this. Sliding up with that 3rd finger. So it's pretty much playing the same notes you've already learned, but just extending the range a little bit of the scale. Now we're going to apply this and experiment with this playing over the previous play along. So it's going to be blues in A. And the A blues scale works quite nicely over that. So once again in the next play along, I'll play along with the first couple of choruses, just playing up and down that scale so you get the fingering right. I'll give you plenty of time to experiment, and then I'll play a little bit at the end. Let's try it. Start at the top again. Okay. Well, that concludes the instructional portion of the video. Hopefully you've gotten a lot from it. And I'd like to recommend possibly seeking out other instructional books and videos, and certainly finding a teacher in your local area that can help you further along your playing and your technique. Because certainly you can learn a lot from the video, but it's great to have somebody there for a little one-on-one explanation of certain things you might be having problems with. Other things to help you practice, it's great to play along with your favorite records. It's the way I learned initially how to play guitar. I was just learning things off my favorite records. Playing with a metronome is great to get your sense of timing together and more solid. And one thing that I do like to practice with quite a bit these days is the Ibanez Rock and Play. It enables you to plug your guitar in. It's got a guitar preamp in it and also a player for cassettes. So you can play along and learn your favorite songs that way. It also has a half-speed switch on there, so if there's a faster guitar lead or run on there, you can slow it down to half-speed. It sounds an octave lower, and you can pick out the notes a little bit more easily than it's just speeding on by you. So check this out. I really like practicing with this. And best of luck. I hope you get a lot of enjoyment out of the guitar as I have over the years. And we'll see you soon. Thanks.